Hello and welcome to Second Rate Film School. Today we'll be talking to staff writer and animatic supervisor for Courage the Cowardly Dog, William Hohauser. Welcome to the show.
I thank you. And I thank you for having me here. I hope I can clarify a few things of what we're talking about.
Well, diving right in. Outside of creator John R. Dilworth, you're one of the few people to have worked on both the show proper and the original short, The Chicken from Outer Space. So we'll start there. How'd you get involved with working on the short?
Well, way back when I worked with other animation people, on and off. I had a regular video business where I was, I have a camera, I film things, interviews, edit for other people. Also, if you look at my resume, it's like it's everywhere. And but one of the things I did was work for animation people who were based in New York. So I did quite a bit of work for Greg Ford when he was doing the return of the Warner Brothers theatrical animations back in the 80s and the early 90s. So he would bring the animatics to me. And, those are basically drawn out storyboards, and we would either do the soundtrack ourselves. It's like, oh, hey, you over there, do Daffy Duck. I'm Daffy Duck. That's terrible, but who cares? We were just timing it. And we would get the drawings and stack them up and put them on videotape. We're editing on tape, everything. So we get a good idea of what was happening. And I was working with a few other people, for commercials and other animated projects. So a mutual friend of John's and mine, who I hadn't met John yet, his name was Mark Heller. He was at that time running an animated commercial firm. So he was making animated commercials for various clients, nationally and locally. And he said, "Oh, I have a guy. We're doing a commercial. He's a little strange, but I think you could work with him." And I said, "Strange? Send them in." And in comes John, and it was some commercial for I don't remember. I mean, John doesn't even care. We both of us had no clue what the commercial was, but we sat there and we put the little 30-second commercial together and did a little adjustments here and there. And John came back with a pilot that he was working on for Nickelodeon a little while later. And, it was just basically, we were screwing around and joking. And he said, I'm just coming back to you. Everybody else is boring. You're not boring. Okay, I don't know if that's a good thing to say, but that's what he said. And eventually he came back. We did a few other things that John worked on prior to Chicken from Outer Space. I don't remember the chronology at this point. But he came back and he said, "Oh, I'm doing this thing for Hanna-Barbera," which was a cartoon experimental series?
Officially an anthology series that, per Wikipedia, was intended to return creative power to animators and artists by recreating the atmosphere that spawned the iconic cartoon characters of the mid-20th century. Unofficially a testing ground for a potential new series.
Yeah. It was just the Hanna-Barbera was at the end of their ropes, so to speak, and somebody said, "Hey, let's try something that's not, kids running back and forth in hallways going into the distance on every show we make. Let's get some like new guys in." And John was one of those new guys. And John, I believe, got in on the strength of his short Dirty Birdie, which he came through me before it was on. So if anyone's out there, they can find Dirty Birdie. It's a great short. And he got the commission, and sure enough, he did all the animatics himself, and we put it together. No music, there was no dialogue track for that. It was a pantomime cartoon. There was a few little, most of it was done fine. I mean, I don't want to take any credit for it, but there was like little details. And this John's like, and I said, "Why don't you, put some parsley around the cooked chicken, on the plate? No, just don't have a cooked chicken. Have it already on a platter with parsley and some potatoes or whatever else." He goes, "That's it." Oh, thank you. Okay. And then after that, he was like, "Okay, we're doing the series and I want you on it." helping me write. He's like, your ideas are okay. They're a little off from the side, but that's good. And that's how I got involved in the show. I mean, it took a long time from the Chicken from Outer Space coming out. And then it got the Academy Award nomination somehow. And before he could, get the deal down, because John was very adamant that this was not going to happen in LA. That he wasn't going to move to LA for whatever, how many years it took to finish the series and work there. He said, I want it in New York. I want to work with New York people. I want to, it's like, that was it. That was he. And it took a long time before they agreed to that. I mean, now it's not that unusual to have the base crews not in LA or not in, well, later Atlanta came up, but everything was like, you have to come to LA. And that's it. There's no possibility of making a show in New York that's a cartoon. Who thought of that? That's crazy. It's not crazy. You could do it anywhere. Where does South Park come from? I don't even know.
They're based out of LA.
Yeah, they're in LA. But now it's like Venture Brothers was Brooklyn, I believe, and Ice Age. The crew who made the Ice Age feature, they were based in Brooklyn. It's a little more lenient now. And then there was the Atlanta, crews eventually started working in Atlanta. So the various Adult Swim crews. I'm off the deep end here. You better put me back on my course because I don't know what I'm talking about anymore.
No, you're fine. That's insane how intensely they were trying to get you guys to do it in LA.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a cartoon, not a live action product. It can be done anywhere. Regardless, that's interesting how ahead of the curve you guys were when it came to breaking away from the mindset of it has to be done in LA.
Well, I mean, you have to understand the balance that goes on with this stuff. Is that they're very afraid, and if it's in New York, they have to take a plane to check up on you, and or they could just get their limo, because they can afford a limo, but none of the animators or anyone working on the show can afford a limo, but they could, and they can come over and I'm going to spend the afternoon checking up on those bums, but I got to get on a plane and check up on the bums. Wait a minute, I could have a whole thing for my family. How do I get this in the budget? But that's basically it. It was fear. Of not having control over the product, and we can have a long argument about whether that's good or not. But that's it. But he put his foot down. He said, no, it's going to be here where I can work, not in a town I despise. And I wouldn't have gone there. And a lot of the people who eventually worked on the show were New York-based people, and I think, that helps. That helped the show in some way. I mean, there's probably a bit more, let's say a bit less, psychology. It's a different psychology here in New York. We're willing to go into little darker spaces and not, feel like we have to analyze it. So, it's the Star Trek Next Generation have I mean, it was like you got Star Trek and then you have Star Trek Next Generation, and then you watch it and you go, oh, stop with the analysis, be quiet. Just have aliens, whatever. Don't have like, oh, what are they feeling? It's like we just lay it out there. There was not so much self-reflection, I would say, conscious, but a lot of it's John. A lot of the show's John. A lot of that darkness and that that undercurrent that's in a lot of the episodes, it really came from John. I don't think the rest of the writers of the crew were really going to go in that direction. I certainly wouldn't, or I certainly wouldn't do it in the way John wanted it. So, people who like the show for that have to thank John. People who like the show because the farmer fell down the stairs at some point can thank me.
Well, I, for one, liked him falling down the stairs or getting hurt a lot.
I do too. He should fall down the stairs a lot. often. There should be a whole episode where it's just an endless staircase in an Escher house where it goes up and then down and this way. It's just the farmer falling. I would watch that for about, okay, not 10 minutes, 9.
I know you're joking, but that actually would have been a great gag. Like, he falls down the stairs as soon as they arrive. And occasionally throughout the rest of the episode, Courage and Muriel would be doing something, and then you see Eustace in the background or foreground falling down the stairs.
Yeah, he's just still falling. And that's his fate for the entire episode, for the entire 10 minutes. That's his fate. We could have gone there at some point, but no more Courage. That was 20 plus years ago, and it's not happening again as far as we're concerned at this point.
Now, on the subject of gags revolving around Eustace being hurt, I don't know if you came up with it, David did, John did, or someone else, but my all-time favorite joke in this series is in the episode Family Business. They're all at Mount Rushmore, and we see the camera on Courage, Muriel, and another character talking. They ask Eustace, who is off camera, what he thinks about the situation, and the camera just pans over, and he's being attacked by a giant squirrel. The squirrel is not the villain. It's not even in the rest of the episode. It's just Eustace suffering for suffering's sake.
Well, there's a thing about the show now. I have to say, from inexperience, I mean, I worked on other animation projects after the show. Nothing that really made it to the air. A lot of pilots, but I from the other shows I worked on, I could say that the imagination that we had the freedom to do on this show was not typical. As I said, there may be other shows where, yeah, you could throw in a gag at almost the last minute and then gets animated, because that's a big process, having it actually animated and ready. But we had a lot of freedom. So, our whole process of writing an episode would be like, okay, we all came into the boardroom or the conference room, whatever you wanted to call it, big table room with chairs. That was the room we went in. And it would be like, okay, what are we doing today? And okay, today we're writing a story, and John would say, oh, I want something, about, I was thinking Bigfoot, so like the Bigfoot episode we had. And okay, and anything else? And he might have something else that he was thinking about, or we would just start, all of us in the room would just start throwing stuff in and hammering an outline and coming up with some basic funny stuff or plot points. And this room, almost every episode, I can't say all of them, but 95% would be John, David Cohen, who was like sort of an anchor, he's sort of like the scripting anchor of the show. He had the most experience. I mean, he'd been working on sitcoms and other animated things for years. And, he really kept the thing there. And then there would be Irv Bauer, who's passed away at this point. And he sort of came out of this more of a dramatic theatrical school. I mean, he worked on some films, but most of his stuff were plays. So he actually came from a very odd background, but John wanted him for that. It wasn't like, oh, we're all talking the same language. You get that on a lot of network stuff where you look at it, you realize everyone's talking the same language who's working on it, and it's very rote, or maybe some people like rote, but it's very, what I'm saying, just very rote. It's like, okay, someone's going to say this, someone's got to respond. Oh, that idiot, who likes him? And then the door opens, it's the idiot. Ha ha ha, very rote stuff. Then there was, so it was John, David, Irv, and then the hired writer for the episode, a lot of, experienced industry people who more or less basically worked on not preschool, but, younger stuff. And we were sort of aiming higher, but they were brought in. Network basically wanted these people, and okay, fine, good. And they're mostly friends with David. And so he knew all of them. And then there was me. It's this sort of like, what's this guy at the end of the table? What's he doing here? And we would just hammer a show together in rough, come up with a little bit of the dialogue, not too much, but the plot points would all be there. And then it would go to the writer of the episode, Sometimes it was David. Once in a while it was Irv. Never me. I wasn't allowed because I didn't have I wasn't Writers Guild, and I still not, because I worked on a cartoon, and the Writers Guild says, if you work on a cartoon, you're not a writer. So I'm not a writer. So there you go. It's revealed.
You're a writer in my heart.
Thank you so much. In reality, I am a writer, but by the bureaucracy, I am not. I am whatever. I'm the gaffer, the key grip, whatever. So the point is, so anyway, it would go to the writer of the episode, and then they would come back with a script, and we would go over the script and make, just go over it, see that, it's something that could go to the storyboard artist. And at that point, we would throw in gags. Sometimes it's like, oh yeah, this section here, page 6, boring. It's just like, yeah, move the plot along. No, move the plot along and throw something funny in if we can. And so, we would write in little things that would go to the story. And sometimes we put in notes for the storyboard artist, but that would go to the storyboard artist. And sometimes it was someone in-house, but frequently it was like farmed out by network decree. So, it would go to these people who had no connection to us. And, that was a problem, but it gave us a storyboard to work on. So like one of the storyboard places was this storyboard farm. I don't know how to call it, in Spain. And I'm sure they were budget, and they came in very much, cheap, but everything would come back looking like it was an Asterix cartoon animation, or sort of Smurfy too, a little Smurfy, and everything would look like, it's like, wait a minute, what is this? Everything's wrong. We have to redraw the panels that look like it was a Smurf cartoon. I mean, that was like the way that poses and stuff like that would be not poses from our character sheets. It would be poses from the Smurfs or an Asterix cartoon. We never see the Asterix. If you don't, it's the Viking, Gaul, very popular in Europe, but obviously they were working on that there, and we would have to fix that. But we would get the storyboards back, and we would put them on the camera and then lay them on the vocal track, which had been done already. We had the vocal track ready, and we would see if it was working. We would see if it was even 10 minutes. We would see if it was 14 minutes. It's like, okay, we got to do something here. And then as it's playing with the vocal track and, the drawings popping up, am I assuming something that your viewers know what a storyboard looks like when it's made into an animatic, or am I jumping the gun here?
Even though the show is called Second Rate Film School, and that implies shoddiness or low caliber, I assume most people are aware of it. So I take that as an insult to my audience, good sir. Just in case I'm wrong, though, storyboards are rough sketches that are created to help the director, animators, writers, and so on visualize the story and how it'll flow, acting as a blueprint to the final product. An animatic is basically taking those storyboards and laying audio down to make a living comic book, much like the ones I make for my own channel, link below, to further see how the pacing and so on works. But again, I assume they knew all of that, so how dare you accuse them of not knowing that?
Okay, good. Audience, I bow to your smartness. There we go. Anyway, we'd run it, and then we would see, we're like, okay, this isn't so funny, or, maybe we need to add something here. Or we would see a joke that wasn't clear. That was the thing. It was like sometimes the joke was not clear until you actually had it moving. Animatics aren't moving per se, but they were just shot, extreme, things like that. And we would sit there and draw new drawings and, adjust the animatic and throw in new gags sometimes. So before I said the farmer falling down the stairs, I know when I saw that, I said, when that scene happened, it was like he scared Courage with a mask or something. And it was like, and then it just ended. And I was like, no, something's got to cap this. He's got to fall down the stairs to the basement. And I was like, okay, we drew it. And we put it in, and I found the Lionel going, ow, ooh, from somewheres. And that was it. That ended up, I guess it ended up in the show. I don't remember. Maybe John cut it out. How dare he do that? That guy's an idiot. But that's how it worked. So it was very fluid. Even sometimes when John would get the masters back, he would re-edit the shows a little, or add a sound effect, or do something. So Courage was like, it wasn't like, okay, we had the story meeting, writer, storyboard artist, everything is finished at that point. It would be very open to suggestions. So we were sitting in my edit room doing the animatics, and everyone had like something to draw on. We had little paper of little screens printed on paper. And be like, I was, the first year it was Joe Maidenberg, I believe, and Rain Wu, and then the second year they left, and it was for the rest of the seasons. It was Dan O'Connor and Jim Mitchell who were sitting there, and we would just draw and stick stuff. And John was there for the first 2 years basically, and then the third season and the fourth season, there was only 4 seasons, even though they released it as 5. Okay, it was really 4. That's another story. We would sit there just fixing and adding, and at one point there, the snowman episode, I remember the storyboard came in, and I believe it was the first one, and a disco ball comes down, and it lights started, and I don't remember exactly what the original was, but Dan said, oh no, I'm gonna have to do something. And he drew this thing where the snowman picks up his snow like it was the dress or something, and you see little twigs. He's got twig feet, and he starts dancing around to the disco music. And he just came up with it, and we put it in, and John calls up and goes, that was incredible. That was the best thing I've ever seen. That's how we worked. So I'm off the deep end again. Help me. Steer me on course, please, Andrew. Help.
No, you're fine. It's nice getting a little peek behind the madness that created such a great show. Now, you mentioned that Cartoon Network basically doubled season 4's output and stretched it into a 5th season. What's interesting about that is neither the DVD nor IMDb list it as having 5 seasons. They just list it in the production seasons, which is odd because most DVD sets I see tend to go based on the air order, not the production order.
Well, I'm actually surprised. I didn't know. I didn't get the box set. It's not like they said, oh, you worked on the show, here's a box set. They're like, you pay like everybody else, jerk. Or they don't even know I exist anymore, because it's a totally different crew there at Cartoon Network. It's like nobody. I think the only person even remotely left is Jay Bastian, and now he's in the Warner's animated. He moved over to Warner's.
So DVDs and IMDb aside, can you elaborate on this issue with the Phantom 5th season?
So the reason the show ended when it did, at the end of what for us was the 4th season, was due to a confluence of events and corporate non-empathy for the people making their product. So what happened is that for the 3rd season, I believe it was the 3rd season, there was a pending writer's strike, and the network said, look, a writer's strike affects the writing. Now, I wasn't in the union, but David was, he probably still is. David is. The other writers who they were bringing in to do individual episodes were all in the Writers Guild. And they said, there's going to be a Writers Guild strike, and we want you to do 2 seasons of writing in a row. So, you have to, what's a season? Well, we did 13 episodes, and I believe it was 13 episodes a season. It may have been less, but it was 2 stories per episode. So, it's like, oh, we're not just writing 13 episodes. We're writing 26 episodes, essentially, because each story, most of the time, were separate stories with different characters, different scenarios, so a little more work, and also, different backgrounds, but that was the art department. They weren't going on strike. So they said, okay, we just would like you to, gird your loins and write and write and write and get out 2 seasons. We did. And that was all well and good. And then the writer's strike didn't happen. It was settled. And so I went and personally, because I was the one person who was in the writer's room, then checking all the scripts, and then I was in the animatic room. So I was sort of like the one person, aside from John, who was like basically, almost, I was 75% through each episode. John was 100%, I was 75, and no one else was. That was, the artists were picking up at a certain point, that whole thing. So I said to Cartoon Network, I said, okay, look, the writer's strike isn't happening. Can we at least have a production break for 3 months or whatever the break was between season 1 and season 2, and then I guess season 3 there was a break too. And they said no. I said, why? Oh, we've already scheduled it that you're just going to keep working. You have to keep working. If it's going to ruin everything if you don't keep working. And it's like, oh, okay. And we kept working, and we were destroyed. Everybody was by the end of our 4th season, it was like we couldn't even think. It was like, we're going to come up with new episodes. We can't come up. So we sort of had a feeling at the end of the 4th one. That's why those 2 episodes, Remembrance of Courage Past and Perfect, sort of came out. It's like we were just like, okay, if it's not the end of the road, we'll just hold on to the scripts because they were approved and blah, 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 blah. Well, we were just like blasted. And John called me up one day. I don't know if he called other people to ask, but he called me up, and he says, well, they want a 5th season. What's your thinking? And I said, no. I said, I want a year off or something. He says, no, they want us to do just 2 months, 2 or 3, the normal 2 or 3 months, and start in again. And I said, I can't do it. And John agreed. I think he didn't agree. I think that was his feeling too. He just wanted to hear it from somebody else, or he asked a lot of people. I don't know. But, he definitely asked me, and I just said, I can't do it. I don't care about the money. It's my brain. It's like, I can't. By the end of the 4th season, I had like divorced, I haven't divorced myself, but I was really not contributing into the whole process as much as I was the first 3 seasons. And it was just exhaustion. It was like, I get a script, I have to fix it. It's fine. It's like I'm tired. I'm working all, onto the night every weekday. And and there's another thing that had happened in the meantime. 9/11, and we were New York based. We were in Manhattan when doing the show when 9/11 happened. And my office was in a shutdown area. Like, they shut down Manhattan, lower Manhattan after that. And, and for a while, at one point there was no electricity. And I couldn't get in my office. And I'm getting phone calls going, why isn't work on the show happening right now? What's the matter? We're going behind schedule. And and Dan said it most succinctly. He goes, do you realize that this country has just been attacked? It was like nothing had happened. It was like, what's the matter with you lazy people? Why aren't you working on this really important cartoon show? Right as the airplanes flying into the buildings overhead, and people are dying like right next to us. And you're not working on the show. You're bad workers. I was like, I don't want to say where that was coming from because I'm not sure, but that was definitely. And I just said, no, I'm not. There's no animatic work happening until my neighborhood is opened up again and I could actually go into the office building, So that was that I don't remember which. Maybe that was the beginning of the fourth season or sometime in the fourth while we were working on it that happened. But that was really tough.
I can't speak to production schedule, but it did occur about halfway through the airing of season 2.
Yeah, somewhere's around there, but that's the thing. It was like it was a blur because there was no season 3, season 4 for us. It was just work, constant work. And, it was like I had a job. I had to go to Iceland and film something. And that was a big deal. Oh, how dare you go to Iceland and have another job from someone else? Aren't we paying you enough? No, you're not paying me enough that I'm not going to go to Iceland for a week. For other clients that I should have the freedom. I thought I was going to have 3 months to work for. Anyway, that's my gripe. I'll get out of that. Get off my lawn. So we were really tired, and we just said to them, no, there's no 5th season. It's not that we didn't have ideas. It was just, it couldn't do it. And next thing we know, they've taken sort of like season 3, and instead of showing all the episodes, they held 2 back. And then then they showed some episodes of season 4, and they held the rest of it back. And then they said, it's season 5. There it is. We did 5 seasons. I don't know why that was important to them. There may have been some reason, but it escapes me.
For complete clarity, the last 4 episodes of season 2 aired in the weeks after 9/11. Then season 3 started airing in January of 2002 and ended in that August. So I assume that means you were already done with season 3 and working on season 4.
Yeah. No, we were, by the time because season 2 was all in the can. Everything's delayed. It was, it's not like South Park where it's like they could hand in a show 30 minutes before airtime. It's technically possible. And they can do it because they've got clout, but not a little production like us. We were like, totally in the whole corporate thing. It's got scripts have got to get approved. Law team's got to look at it. Then the finished episodes go through, and and then it sits in a can until it's all there, ready to go. We were not anywhere near airtime when each episode was finished.
Exactly. And even if you weren't completely done 100% with the episodes for season 3, by that point you had to have been pretty damn close to the later ones, and for sure done with the ones airing a matter of weeks later.
Yeah. But it was that's the thing. Of course, it was 20 plus years ago. So why would anyone remember such stupid details?
For my small web series, God damn it.
But they were, we were in the middle, and, it was tough. It was tough. It's exhilarating in some point, because you made the work. But at some point you reach this thing where you're like, I can't think anymore. And you're just doing the job, but you're not happy entirely. And also Lionel had passed away, so we were working with a new voice person whose name I'm sorry, I don't remember your name. I hope you're not alive to come and haunt me. Oh, maybe if you're a ghost, you haunt me. That'd be okay. So we were dealing with how do we use tracks of Lionel with the new person who didn't sound quite the same, at all. But, we had a lot, it was a lot of things that happened, and life. Won't someone stop the life? I can't stand life. Stop it now.
I feel you. Also, doubling back a bit, Eustace's replacement actor was Arthur Anderson.
Yes, Arthur Anderson. I have nothing to say. He tried. It was like who we could get. It was who John picked, and he tried. Lionel was a force to be reckoned with. He hadn't passed. He hadn't passed away yet, but he quit. He wasn't feeling good, and he had some. When you're a voice actor on these shows, I don't know exactly the details. I wasn't part of it. You would have to ask the producer exactly what the contractual details were, but they had to do work for Cartoon Network, not just the show. So all the promos and everything were Cartoon Network people running it, and not John. And those are different people. John would get somebody like Lionel, and he would cast him because Lionel could do the part, not because it was somebody you had to like, do 20, 30 takes to get one line out of. It was like, oh, this guy could just, he's going to hit it on the first take or the third take at worst. And I heard the takes, and there was frequently, I didn't hear that many takes. Because I would get the audio, and I would put the audio track together before the actual animatic. Actually, no, I would put it together and drop in the pictures at the same time, just to get the timing. But Lionel and Thea and Marty, they were people who could pretty much do it on very few takes. They were the parts. They knew the parts. They once they started the show, they got through they knew what to do, and they were good at it. But when you get a corporate person who's bringing somebody into a voice session, there's like 3 takes ain't gonna cut it. It looks like they're not doing their job. So they will make you do 30 takes just so they could tell their bosses that, oh, I did the job. I made them do 30 takes. Well, the first one was perfect. What about the other 29? Well, don't talk about these things. This is not something we talk about in corporate settings. And he just basically couldn't. He would come in. He was old, but he would come in and be finished within an hour. And John would congratulate him, and he felt good. He would go in a session with a Cartoon Network person. I'm not pointing fingers. I don't know the exact. I wasn't there, but they would make him do so many takes, and he was like exhausted. He didn't want to do it anymore, so he retired from the show. That's as far as I know what happened. I could be wrong.
It's interesting that you mentioned that because, again, memory is a funny thing. I mostly recall it just being Courage talking in the bumpers, but Eustace and Muriel were in pretty close to equal numbers of the bumpers. So I have to imagine he recorded quite a few.
I was that was not something I would see. I mean, I think I met him maybe 3 times at most, and I met Thea maybe 3 or 4 times at most. And Marty, I met a number more times. In fact, I ran into him one day inadvertently because he was a tour. I don't know if he's doing it now, but a few years ago, he was doing one of those Manhattan double-deck tour buses. He was the tour guide who would stand up there with the microphone. Oh, look over there. That's where, it's like, but I didn't get to see him too often because they were, except at get-togethers at Stretch, because we were just in different places, but I would write lines. I would, call up. I say, hey, is Thea or is Lionel in the room today? Doing, oh yeah, Lionel's here. And I was like, oh, quick, I'm sending you some lines. Get him to do it. And John would be like, what's this for? I said, oh, it's Courage to Fly. It's very short. That one just came out very short. And I said, here, I just get some lines so we have some filler. The whole thing about Eustace chasing Courage, he hates flies, and he's got a big fly swatter, and he's got fly paper. All that stuff is, I not all of it, but some of it, like where Muriel gets the fly paper stuck on her face and her face comes off onto the fly paper, which is like a real Warner Brothers joke. That, no one had done that joke for like 40 years. And I said, oh, let's do it, a flypaper joke. But that was all like me putting the animatic together going, oh no, how are we going to fill in 4 minutes? Well, dialogue, that's the easiest thing. And I would wrote stuff really quick. I sent it to the voice session, and Lionel did it, and Thea was there, and she did her lines about the bologna sandwiches, and but that's going back to saying how fluid we could do the shows. We had this agreement that things could be fluid. It wasn't like, oh God, it's only 6 minutes long. Well, we're going to have a lot of shots of fruit in a bowl for like about 3 minutes, and then what else are we going to do for the other 3 minutes? Oh, I know, the sun's going to set. Let's just show that for 3. That's just how that worked. But I guess they used Eustace as a character for the promos a lot. I didn't see many of the promos. I saw very few of them, so I'm not familiar. But it seemed to be that was the point of contention for Lionel, and he was like, I can work for John, but I can't work for these people, and he quit.
Yeah, I found a bunch of them that I'll somehow be using in the final video, so I'll send them to you. Now, on the transition from Lionel to Arthur, as a kid, I never noticed. And I think a lot of that comes due to the fact that the reruns of the first few seasons that Lionel did were being shown a lot at that point. Add in the fact that Lionel's audio was recycled, as you said, it was a very subtle transition as far as a kid could tell, at least. Now, as an adult, I can clearly hear the difference, and no disrespect to Arthur, he did great.
Yeah.
But Lionel made that role.
Yeah, I mean, he was just wonderful. I mean, it's like I actually don't know much about his background, quite frankly. I mean, I'm not sure how he came in through Peter Fernandez or just the regular audition process. I have a feeling Peter probably knew him. You know, that was actually sort of fun. It was like, you know, it's like, oh yeah, our voice guy who's directing all the voices, Peter Fernandez, and I'm like, Peter Fernandez, Speed Racer? It's Speed Racer? Because that's what I grew up on. I was a little kid. It was like, you know, you turn on, come home from school, you turn on, and there's like, you know, oh, it's Speed Racer. Oh, you know, that really funny way they talked. It was nice to actually talk to Speed Racer. And I think he did Sparky, and I don't know what else he did, but my first thing when I met him, I said, Peter, I got a question. It's very, very important. Why did they talk like that on Speed Racer? It was such a strange way of talking. And when we were kids, we would imitate it. And, you know, we were playing in the park doing, you know, Marine Boy or Space, you know, and he goes, oh, well, we didn't know at the time that they didn't do the lips after they got the voice track in Japan at that time. I don't know what they do now, but so the animator just animated it. They would do the lines in the drawing, you know, while drawing, and they would just put the track on top of it. So it was actually not quite in sync in Japanese at all. And we thought we had to put a word in every lip movement. We didn't know that they weren't doing it in Japan. They were just had, you know, it would be out of sync a little bit, but nobody cared, you know, it was fine, you know, but he felt like they had to put it into the lip sync. So they were adding syllables and adding words, rewriting the script so that it was like, oh my goodness, Speed, look over there, the boulders are falling down from the street, you know, and it was really like, oh no, look, the boulders, you know, but they saw the lip movements, and they didn't have a voice track. They got sent just the music and effects. Anyway, okay, that's off this topic, but that's working with Peter Fernandez, which was nice, you know, and I got to do a few voices during the course of the thing, and you know, he was like, you know, I did one of the snowmen, one of the brothers of the snowman, I think in the second snowman episode. You know, so I got to, you know, for my 10 minutes of work, I got to work with them. So that was nice.
Now, switching gears, obviously this show pushed the boundaries heavily of what would be considered typical or acceptable for children's content in the late 90s and early 2000s. You guys basically got away with murder, but I'm sure there was a line somewhere. So do you recall any major pushback from the network?
You know, the network censor thing it was strange to me, at least. I mean, you know, yeah, we can all sit back as fans and go, "Oh my goodness, they censored it," you know, and you know, and go, "Oh, the auteur has been squelched," is blah, blah, you know. But sometimes, you know, when you get censored, but you still want to get that point across, you come up with some really smart ways of doing it that is not exactly readable to the people who are doing the censoring. And I can understand, you know, look at Ren and Stimpy. I mean, and his later show, the superhero show. I really liked it. I forgot the name of Chris Felucci's whatever. Anyway, but he was getting censored all the time, and he would resent it. We did a few things that they said outright no to, but they were odd. Like we had the Hollywood sign in one episode, and they were like, no, you can't show that. We're going to get sued. they were worried about things like that, like getting sued. So we came up with some alternatives. I don't remember what we did, but you know, we were banding about Holly Weird is the sign, you know, or something like that. But occasionally they would be. Well, okay. One example was that the Asian character who was voiced by one of the artists on the show. The Asian character whose name was never mentioned on the show for that very reason. He was named, let's say it wasn't a wise idea to call him that, and I won't repeat it because you have a family audience.
Yes, exclusively.
And I might mispronounce it and actually not say the right naughty word. So I don't want to be incorrect, but we were never allowed to say his name on the show. Okay, fine. He was a peripheral character. One time, but I was actually amazed how much we were allowed to get away with. We didn't get too many notes back. The one that struck me as being really whacked out was the episode with they were going camping and they're the two bandit raccoons. I don't remember the episode name, but so at one point the raccoons, like all the other characters on the show, for some reason have an obsession with kidnapping Muriel or abducting her in some way. They abduct her, and there our usual thing where, you know, Courage, Muriel's going and Courage imagines something in thought balloons over his head. It's like, oh, what's happening to Muriel? And it's always an absurdity. So he's imagining something. And one of the things we came up with was that he's imagining the raccoons around a campfire with bones, and they're picking bones and with a skull. And the Cartoon Network came back and said, "You can't show that. That's horrible. That's terrible. You know, we can't have anyone thinking that Muriel's dead." And we're saying, "Well, she's not dead. It's an imagination. It's in a thought balloon. How can you make it clearer?" I mean, it's like, it's just the characters against a white background in a thought balloon. I mean, it's not real. No. And they said, "Well, here's an option. Do this." And they sent back something. I don't know where it came from, whether it was written or drawn, but basically they wanted the same pose, the two raccoons and the campfire, and Muriel's there, and she's alive, tied up, and screaming live. Ah! But her legs which are kicking up and down, are skeleton legs. So it's like, I looked at that. I called up. I said, no, this is like, hard R now. We're in like, Eli Roth territory where this is Texas Chainsaw Massacre material. She's alive, but she's half eaten. This is an improvement. Like, no, and we came up with some compromise, but which was nice. We actually compromised, and they agreed, and they said they realized, that's a little. I mean, that's way more traumatic than just a pile of bones. I mean, the youngest kids are not going to really get it, and the older kids are going to be like, oh yeah, ha ha, she's a pile of bones. We make that joke all the time. So that was like an instance I remember. I mean, there may have been other ones that did not filter down to me. That filtered down because it was in the animatic process that they were making these changes. But it's sort of amazing. I mean, I'm surprised. Freaky Fred made it at all. I still personally am very disturbed by that episode. It was not one I was happy about, and I still find it disturbing. But I also find it amazing that it is one of the most talked about episodes. 20 plus years later, that when you go on Courage, you go wherever on the social media, Freaky Fred comes up a lot. Freaky Fred comes up. Perfect comes up.
Ramses is often brought up by the fans.
Ramses comes up. Yeah, that was, and let's face it, that Ramsey, I didn't experience it as a 30 plus 40-year-old, whatever I was when I worked on the show. I did not experience it at Ramsey as terribly scary, but it was terribly scary. And I have to say, Cartoon Network let it go, and I think that was good of them. I mean, but I had no concept of how scary it was going to end up in the animatic process. That it was going to end up being this sort of like 3D animated, and the animation is like very stilted, so that makes it scarier. But they were okay with it. There might have been other instances, as I said, that did not filter down to me. But Freaky Fred, wow. I previous take of this, I asked you, what your feeling about it was. That is such a creepy episode, and Freaky Fred himself, there's so many overtones that I don't even know if, when it was written, I knew what the overtones were, because I had worked with abused adults who had been abused children on some media projects many years. So as soon as I saw this story shaping up, I said, uh-oh, this is going into nasty territory. And but I was, in a way, I guess I was wrong. It was good that it got made, and that there's people out there who somehow, I don't know how they're relating to it. I don't know if they're relating to it that way on a conscious level or what, but the whole thing with Courage being locked in the bathroom with this creepy old guy who wants to shave him and stuff pancakes down his throat. It's like, whoa. It's like, we couldn't make that. Nobody could make that today, except if you were like, for either as a joke for frat boys on Adult Swim or some independent production where they would, but that would be flagged by, society. Is like, you can't do it. You couldn't do it in a jokey way like that. It would have to be super serious. Am I right? Am I wrong?
Meanwhile, 20 years ago, it's put on the air as TVY7.
Yeah, I mean, so one, it's sort of remarkable. Two, I think maybe some leeway, in overall was being given to us by Cartoon Network, mainly through Linda Semensky. Like, let's go a little further. Let's up the age, group a little bit, to get a better audience. I don't know. Or maybe they weren't thinking about it at all. They were busy with some other crisis for 4 years. I don't know. But we were lucky. I could say, yeah, the Cartoon Network was screwy and did this, and oh yeah, I'm screwy, I did that. John's screwy, he does this, but it worked out.
That's the thing, rewatching the show, obviously as an adult pushing 30, who's seen numerous hard R horror movies, it's not really scary anymore.
Yeah.
But there are a handful of episodes and moments that are still creepy. Freaky Fred as an episode itself isn't that scary to me now, but just something about him still feels unsettling. This was years, when the show was airing, and I was at a friend's house, and they were like, "Oh, hey, look on the thing, Courage is on. Let's turn it on." Okay, let's turn it on. I don't know what episode it's going to be, and it was Freaky Fred. I said, "Turn the TV off." Why? I said, "No, I do not want this on. I do not want to explain the show. I don't want to not explain it. I just don't want it to exist at this moment in my life." I was hoping, it'd be Courage the Fly. Oh, it'd be, that was the one episode that but I see people, they make little GIFs of them and they're little pieces, and I'm like, okay, maybe I'm uncomfortable, but I'm not everyone's psychologist. Maybe this is good. I'm not the one to say, here I am. My concern is Eustace falling down the stairs. That's all I care about. Okay. Courage just, Courage is screaming because he sees something scary, and like, well, how's he going to fall apart this time? Oh, we wrote most of those, by the way. Those reaction takes. John
made the template. I mean, it was that those reaction takes, which are Tex Avery, mainly they're Tex Avery takes, for everyone research Tex Avery right now and come back to, no, don't do that. But after a while, it was like we would just write in the script, Courage reacts, and we would wait until the animatic session to figure out what was appropriate or whatever just came into our heads. I actually have a pile of unused takes somewhere. I don't know where they are, that we just never got around to. I had them hanging on my wall. It's like, Courage sees something that's dumbfounding. Well, what happens? Well, a meteor lands on him, and there's just a rock there in the ground. You don't see him anymore. That was fun. That we had a good time. What is it? Oh, his eyes fall out of his head, roll across the room, and then he picks them up and puts them back in, and then takes again. Because he sees it again. We made those up on the spot usually. Those are fun to make. I had a good time.
So the show has ended. The last official Courage product made was 2013's The Fog of Courage. But more recently, we were graced with a crossover movie with Scooby-Doo that neither John, David, or you were involved with.
No.
Well, I don't really consider it canon as John didn't work on it. It did happen. So do you have any thoughts on it?
That was a mistake. I mean, I understand the marketing people wanting this to happen because they got their channel and they got to have somebody watch their stupid channel. But the first reaction I had when I heard about it was like, why can't they live in their own worlds? Their worlds don't intermingle, and the only gag I came up with that I thought was okay, everything was about the Scooby-Doo gang getting completely demolished because they think everybody's like wearing a mask. So, but I was, my thing was just like, they come up and the snowman's there and one of them goes, oh, you're just wearing a mask. And they lift the snowman's head up and his head is like, there's no head under there. And the head starts talking to them, ha ha ha, just not, whatever his Sean Connery accent. But it was like two worlds that they don't belong together. It's like, except in a marketer's mind. And that's the thing is like, how do you balance marketing, the need to make money, the need to cover your costs? I mean, an animated series that is not cheap. No matter how much they try to rip us off when we're working, it's still not cheap. It's still, you've got to pay people and it adds up and you've got to figure out a way, like, how am I going to make the most money out of this and not get fired? Well, they all get fired eventually anyway. So maybe it's a pointless task for the executives. But, there is a lot of, balance in there, and versus the creativity and the commercial nature of this whole thing. So, they never really marketed Courage. John was always, over the years, he's complained. He's like, why did I come up with a pink dog? Boys don't want it. And the show's too scary for girls. Although maybe that's different nowadays. But back then, Courage was not a marketing bonanza by any stretch. Powerpuff Girls, wow, that was big. Dexter, I don't know how big, but probably big enough that they were happy. There were other shows, and here comes I don't know about Cow and Chicken.
Cow and Chicken was probably not a terribly marketable show. I don't know that for sure, but I'm willing to bet it wasn't.
Yeah. I mean, it's like, Cow and, but they let him do Cow and Chicken. I mean, it burnt out very fast, which is not surprising. But I mean, those are crazy pilots. I thought they were great. But they were bending everything. They were bending everything about animation, about doing a TV show. How do you keep that up for even a season? But, that's my point, is that, we did this show and it's lasting a long time, but, for people in their heads, but, as a commercial venture, it wasn't that great for the network.
That's the interesting thing. I watched Cartoon Network in equal measure with Nickelodeon and Disney Channel as a kid, because in my market, all three stations were in a row. Nickelodeon was channel 44, Disney was 45, and Cartoon Network was 46. which was great since as a kid, I could just watch my favorite shows by going up and down 2 channels max.
Oh,
So I know I would have been in the market for Cartoon Network toys, but unless I was going to the wrong toy stores, I didn't see much representation for the network compared to Nickelodeon or Disney Channel toys that were flooding the toy aisles. I only recall some Powerpuff Girls and Dexter's Lab stuff, and in much smaller quantities compared to what Nick and Disney got. The only toys I saw a ton of growing up that came from Cartoon Network were Scooby Doo or Looney Tunes based. So I really don't know what was going on here and why Cartoon Network didn't capitalize on all their shows, including Courage.
yeah, but I mean, there was like a whole thing with books, that you don't necessarily, I mean, I don't know. I don't. All I know is that there was more marketing in Powerpuff than there was in Courage by a long shot. I don't know about Ed, and Eddie, because they were concurrent with us, I think, and but it's a balance, and I mean, I can grouch about their choices all I want, but they had the money, so you have to, what are you gonna do? It's like John and I were not gonna like produce 100 plus episodes on our own. They were putting in the money, so we have to actually give a little bit of credit to them for letting that travesty to the psyche of American children go on for so long.
Well, when you put it that way, then thank you, corporate overlords.
The interesting thing is the show's still running overseas, actually, pretty regularly. I used to see royalty checks until they realized I wasn't supposed to get any because I wasn't in the Writers Guild. That stopped. I was getting $200 every 4 years. Wow. Oh, damn. I'm not getting it anymore.
Wah, wah.
That's true, by the way. That's true. They realized that they weren't supposed to send me the checks. And I was like, do you want me to pay all that money back that you gave me? All like, $260 over the past 20 years. And they were like, no, it's okay. But you're not getting any more. That's the end of it. And I was like, okay.
Geez. Well, that was nice. That paid for some groceries or like 1 gallon of gas or something.
Yeah, a gallon of gas. They bought a gallon of gas for me. Thank you.
Now, to your point of it not airing here in the US, like, I get it. It is streaming, but it's not like it's a huge thing for kids today. So it's bizarre they even bothered doing a Scooby-Doo crossover at all.
The same time that was happening was when they were coming to us. I mean, I don't know if John got into this with you or not, they wanted us to revive this series about 4 or 5 years ago, and John and I put a lot of work into it. He drew an animatic. We put that together. We did voices. Thea was there. Then she passed away about a year ago, so 2 years ago. And then they changed their mind, and then they wanted basically Courage babies. They wanted, oh no, we want to base it on the episode that Michael Sporn did a lot of the animation for, where it's Courage, origin of Courage, how he lost his parents to a mad vet who sent them to the moon for some reason, and that was all the flashbacks were done in a storybook style, which was by Michael Sporn, which was an interesting episode. Nice thing was John wanted like style changes. He didn't want it to look the same all the time. He really was into all different style changes on the show. So I actually got to animate a couple of things. A lot of the TV commercials are mine. I made them, with cutouts or whatever. But they said, we want a new series, but it's Courage as a baby. And we decided that wasn't going to work. We wrote a bunch of episodes. We had the whole season planned out as story stuff, and we made an animatic. And I think one of the two things happened. Everyone who came up with the idea was fired, and then the new people were like, nothing. We don't use other people's ideas. We're going to come up with new ideas, or they just decided that it wasn't the time. But that was the same area that this Courage Scooby-Doo combo movie was come up with, and they may have had some sort of overriding plan. And they did the movie themselves over in LA. It was all their people. So they had a lot more control over it than these two old wackos who coming up with the same weird stuff.
That's a shame. And I don't want to just keep harping on this crossover because I'm sure the people who made it are talented and tried, but it just doesn't get Courage as far as I'm concerned. Well, I'm sure if you, John, and David locked yourselves into a room and really put your best effort into it, you for sure could come up with something that would make the concept work better than what we got. But I think it's better left alone. I firmly believe, like most crossovers, these two worlds should be separate entities, with the exceptions of being a bumper here and there like they used to do.
Yeah, and the promo is fine because then it's like they're just actors, hanging out with each other. I don't want to make this go on too much longer if I'm like ruining your life or something.
You're fine. I have no life.
One of the things is when I was talking about the way we worked and the openness, the way we worked, I did not really know it at the time. I mean, I grew up on afternoon Warner Brothers cartoons and Popeye, it's Fleischers. They didn't show the other Fleischers, but you didn't see the Betty Boops. I had later, I got to see them all, but I grew up on those cartoons, and there's something happening in there that is not replicable, not repeatable right now in our environment of how entertainment is made. But I later found out, because in my later years, I've been doing documentaries and stuff for Kino Lorber and Criterion and things like that. But I later, and working with Greg Ford, who's an incredible animation historian, that we were actually working closer to the Warner Brothers style and a bit of the Fleischer style than we were doing television animation. Just the way we were approaching things. Because more in the Warner Brothers cartoon, they had a writer or the director, and they'd come up with a story and they would talk it through. And there might have been writers, group writer meetings, I don't know. But at one point, the storyboard person would put the storyboards up and they had a room. And you can find photographs of this online and of the Warner Brothers, and people could come in. It wasn't like, shut the door, nobody can see this cartoon. It's like, it belongs to Friz Freleng and nobody can see it. That Chuck Jones will steal. No, they would come into the room and people would say, oh, this is sort of not, what if this happened? And they would be like, okay. They would go in, or they would take something out. And it was an open process. And then they would do the animation and they do pencil tests. And maybe at that point it was a little bit more locked in stone. But there was this thing where it could grow. The product, the individual cartoon could become full. Where the process we have now is very restricted. And as I said, it's like writing's done. There's a cutoff point. There's no new writing. You can't like sit there in the Animatic session and go, oh, are you doing a recording session tomorrow? Can you have this person and this person say these so we can drop it in? That doesn't happen. There's not that liberty all the time. And it's like we were putting stuff in the animatics, and I do not think that the network was seeing those animatics. I'm not sure, but they wouldn't see the result of it until the animation was finished. And maybe at that point they just said, oh, what are we going to do with these people? Let's show it. So that's just my point. As I was saying, is like we were, and also the thing with like just throwing in little funny stuff, that was Fleischer. Fleischer cartoons were, they did not work the way it's animation's made now. It was a totally, and Dave Fleischer would just come in and say to the animator, oh, that's funny. Can you add a mouse? What's the mouse going to do? Oh, he just comes up and he squeaks and then he runs away. Okay, why not? When you see the finished cartoon, it's part of the charm of the cartoon. I mean, Popeye's lines were not written for the most part. The Jack Mercer, who did Popeye's voice, he was improvising. That's why the lips aren't moving. And May Castell was improvising. And so the gentleman who's doing Bluto, whose name I don't remember, but that was an open process where some of the funniest things in a Popeye cartoon from the 30s is Jack Mercer in the recording session watching the animation go by, and he's like going, well, and he comes up with a funny line. So, and then it blurs the process. It's like, okay, yeah, you have a writer. but in the end, yeah, they wrote some of it, but what did they really write? And it gets a little, but that's not unusual in Hollywood. I mean, there's the big feature films have like famous writers who ghosted part of the film after the script, but they're not on this. You don't see their credit. You find out years later. Carrie Fisher was like one of those. It was like, what? Carrie Fisher was writing scripts? Yeah, she was. She was a noted, script fixer, but her name's not up there. You just get to know it as a fan after a while.
Well, speaking of fans, this show obviously has a ton of them, and they've kept the show alive for 20 plus years since it ended. Now, reflecting on everything we've discussed and your experiences during and after the series, what do you view the legacy of the show is, and how do you want people to remember it?
Wow, that's a question. That's a very interesting question. What would I want people to remember the show? I think I want people to remember the show for its open. It's actually, I think it was an openness. There's openness to that show. I'm sure there's other shows since then that have replicated it, in their own way. But the idea is that nothing in that show was like rote. I mean, yeah, okay, yeah, Courage is going to scream. We know that. That's rote. Muriel's going to get kidnapped by a goose god. That's rote, or whatever. But, the rest of the thing, all the different concepts, I mean, I think there was a lot of things coming from a lot of different directions in the show. And, the show was probably more psychological than a lot of shows. I can't say that's good or bad, but John certainly gave it that edge. And I think that's, more of a legacy than maybe, a gag or two that, one of us came up with. So I have my favorite episodes, but, I worked on them and I have some sort of connection to those more than other episodes. So that's my legacy. It's like, I like that episode, a Courage versus Mecha Courage. That's my personal favorite, but that's because my contribution, I feel proud of it. I mean, I don't know, I could ask it of you because you're from a generation that grew up watching it. And, when you're from the inside, you don't quite always have the same, it doesn't hit you the same. It's like, there's a spoon hiding behind that part of the set. It's like, oh, why didn't I move that spoon? No one can see it, but I should have moved it. I mean, yeah, I've met filmmakers like that. It's like, they can't divorce themselves from the physical making of their product. So I don't know how to say it. I just feel that I hope that other people in the future who get to do a series or animation, look at the visuals, look at the fact that we weren't, filling the thing up, unlike me talking with constant talk. That's one of my complaints of stuff I've seen recently. It's just everyone's talking nonstop, and we would slow down. We would have quietness. We would have beautiful visuals. We would have just animation, just physical animation, which is our Warner Brothers, influence was that, Warner Brothers cartoon wasn't nonstop talk. Nonstop talk is to save money, quite frankly. I mean, I can't, I can complain about it, but I also understand the realities of not, it's cheaper to hire the guy who does the lip reading thing, or I forget the name of the, I worked in the business. I don't even know the names of some of these jobs anymore. But that talking saves time in terms of, it saves money. But it is also, I think I would hope that there would be shows that would be like, people would look at it and say, oh, We use our eyes too. It's not just our ears.
That's an interesting take. Now, to answer your question, for years I'd look back on the show as being the really scary show that scared the crap out of me, while at the same time, it did help me to be braver as a kid. Yes, I also loved watching Scooby Doo as a kid, which dealt with a lot of the same themes, but Scooby and Shaggy rarely overcame their fears on their own. The rest of the gang encouraged them or helped them save the day. Courage didn't have that luxury, so that was very inspirational to look from within to become braver. Now, on the other hand, I had really forgotten how emotional and sweet the series could be. Now, in fairness to me for overlooking it, the vast majority of the episodes don't fall into that camp.
No.
But I'd say about a third of the episodes do. We'd often see characters that were misunderstood and thought to be villains, like the Hunchback of Nowhere or in The Mask, as well as tragic episodes like Last of the Star Makers or Remembrance of Courage Past. Or episodes that didn't have conventional scares but dealt with heavier topics like Perfect. So it's ultimately interesting to see these gut punch or emotional episodes sandwiched between something like Freaky Fred or Curse of King Ramses.
Or the clutching foot or something like that, where it's like, what the hell's going on here?
Exactly. It's the scary elements and the absurdity of the characters and Courage's reactions that people latch onto the most. It seems to be the heart and, as you mentioned, openness that are most often overlooked, at least by casual fans. I also think people forget how absurdly funny this show is. There are a ton of great gags, visual jokes, and situations that are constantly being thrown at you. Like I said, Eustace being attacked by that giant squirrel or randomly being kidnapped by a female snow yeti is hilarious.
It was a yeti of something. It was like a yeti in a dress.
Exactly. Just the sheer amount of absurd humor is amazing. Now, on that note with Eustace, it's actually something funny I just realized. Cartoon Network had such an issue with you killing Muriel off in a dream sequence, but the vast majority of the episodes end with Eustace being dead or something horrible happening to him, like him being vaporized or turned into a gold statue or encased in a stone tablet or whatever. He died a lot.
Yeah, they never complained about that. That's an interesting thing. I hadn't thought about that until you brought it up. Eustace getting like some horrible fate at the end. It was like, I think, oh no, we had to hear his voice. That was the thing. You had to hear his voice somehow at the end. So that then he wasn't dead. But I don't know if that was our decision or their decision. But they didn't mind him being demolished completely. It was fine.
I guess that allowance comes from him being a side antagonist in many episodes to being the main villain in several, and just a jerk in general across the entire series. I mean, we only ever really saw Eustace being kind-hearted or sympathetic a few times.
Here, this is going to be the 60-year-old grouch talking. But I think we balanced, you mentioned the pathos and the stuff being balanced with, pretty out there surreal comedy, and slapstick, straight out slapstick. I think the one thing we weren't, and it's hard to, is we weren't snarky. And I watched some of the newer shows, and it's why I don't watch sitcoms ever, because they've been the same for 20 years to me. But there's like a level of snarkiness. We never really disrespected anything. I mean, yeah, we had kooky characters, but they existed on their own plane. Benton Quarantino or whatever that the zombie filmmaker we had come back twice. There were bad guys, but we actually respected all the characters in their, in their own way. There wasn't this level of everyone sneering at everybody else. I mean, maybe I'm just imagining this, and you can cut this out or send it to the institution to get me institutionalized finally.
They're already on their way to pick you up. Until they get here, feel free to continue.
We were letting we let the stories. The stories were, the characters were important. The stories were as important. I mean, you may look at some of them and go, "What? He's crazy," but it wasn't about showing how smart we were. If there was an undercurrent, we let it be an undercurrent. We didn't let it sit there on the top. And it's a hard balance. I think there's actually a corporate request for everything being sort of like know-it-all snark. And yeah, I'm a know-it-all too. I mean, I have to say this from the from the point of view of an actual know-it-all who doesn't know anything. But being snarky, it's not my thing. And the Adult Swim, a lot of the, I mean, there were some funny Adult Swim shows, but a lot of them, they're sort of cynical. And I don't think we were cynical ever. I mean, we recognized that there were people with not quite good intentions, but it wasn't approached with like a cynical, thing.
Oh, it's very interesting to see the nuance you created. Yes, there were straight up villains, but we'd also see characters like the Duck brothers who were perceived as villainous due to their actions, but we then see they were just trying to save their brother.
Yeah.
We also see this complex nature in even certain villains, for instance, the Snowman. Sure, he is trying to kill Eustace and Muriel, but he's given a very tragic backstory and you understand where he's coming from. Where, yeah, he's a killer, but our pollution had already killed all of his family and friends first. Of course, two wrongs don't make it right, but that's pretty profound for our kids show to give the villain that sympathetic of a backstory, as well as giving the episode a pretty green message, which was ahead of the curve.
Right. It was the Arctic melting, and it hadn't happened yet. It really, I mean, people knew it was going to happen, and that's where we were coming from. But we didn't have a news report saying that the North Pole is liquid for a week or whatever, or it was broken up. I don't know, but it was like it never happened before. So now we're hearing about polar bears that are like emaciated because there's no ice for them to fish from, to get their prey from. So right, but we didn't ever. Yeah, this thing about Scooby-Doo is Scooby-Doo always is. I don't know what they've done with it in the past 20 years because I've tried to avoid it very religiously, or 30 years I've been avoiding anything to do with it. But it came from that 60s it comes from that 60s mentality, and maybe that's part of the reason it's comforting to some people. But everything's okay, everything's normal. Look, there aren't any creatures, or it's just some bad guy who's like wants you pull off the scary mask, and it's like, oh, it's him, okay, but that's like it's comfort food. And I don't think you could classify Courage the Cowardly Dog as comfort food ever.
You shouldn't, at least.
Well, you shouldn't. If it's comfort food, maybe we need to be tracking your movements. Just where's this guy going now?
Well, put me on a watch list then. So I think now that we've condemned the audience to government surveillance, that's a good place to end it. William, I just wanted to thank you for coming on today and talking with us.
You are welcome. This was quite fun. I'm glad you gave me time to rehearse my lines, and no one's going to understand that. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's fine. Zoom screwed up our first call and it crashed while processing the recording, and the entire discussion was lost. So thanks for being a good sport and doing a take two.
Thank you for having me. I had a good time. I'm always nice to talk to somebody who was positively influenced by the show.
Yeah, weirdly though, I haven't had a good night's sleep since 1999.
Yeah, but see, nothing ever got you at night. That's from us. We saved you from all those things that could have gotten you at night.
Exactly.
We did good work, I must say.
100%. Well, thank you for your time, and I'll let you go.
Talk to you soon, then.
Now, a note from the future. The exciting thing I have to say before this episode is over, that this is just part of a much larger look at Courage the Cowardly Dog. So check out the link in the description for a massive 3-part retrospective on the series featuring interviews with fellow Courage alums, including series creator John R. Dilworth, head writer David Stephen Cohen, music composer Jody Gray, and the voice of Courage himself, Marty Grabstein, all live right now on the channel. Also live right now is the full interviews with them as well, so check those out as well. Until next time, I'm Andrew Wass, and I hope you enjoyed your time with us.